Around the Ozarks is now on your FM radio. Listen to Around the Ozarks mornings with Grace Gooley as I spotlight local people, stories, and podcasts, all while playing the country legends of the 90s and the hit makers of the 2000s. It's on the Ozarks' best country, 105.1 The Bull.
Fishing's better when you share the experience. Meet new fishing partners through the Co-Angler app. Offer trips, request trips, connect with anglers in your area, and share the cost. Make every trip more affordable and more fun. Co-Angler, connecting anglers one trip at a time.
Welcome to Beyond the Gate, a podcast sharing the grit, growth, and spirit of rural life. From fields to front porches, this is where the heart of agriculture comes to life. Today we go beyond the gate with a farmer, a veteran, a mechanic, a father, a husband. But most recently, we know him as our 57th governor of the great state of Missouri, Governor Mike Parson. Thank you for joining us in the studio, and welcome.
Well, glad to be here, Jamie, and appreciate the introduction. Through the gate, back on the farm.
Through the gate and back on the farm, and we're excited to have you here beyond the gate. I have so many questions. I've told you I've got lots of things I want to talk about. You are a great storyteller, and I've heard a few, and then as I've dove deeper, I've learned more. And so I want to go back to the good old days in Hickory County.
Oh, boy.
The very beginning. Tell us about Hickory County as a young lad. Tell us about your parents.
Oh, my gosh. My mom and dad were, just solid as a rock. When we grew, I was the youngest of four boys. My mom and dad, a lot of people don't realize they were sharecroppers. Mm-hmm. So, it was probably 10 or 11 years old before we even had a house. That we always living off somebody else's farm and doing the work for them and everything for them at the time. But my mom and dad were just, they were faith-driven people, and when the church was open, we were there, and they taught us how to work hard. All of us boys, we just worked our way through on a small farm. But I will tell you this about my mom and dad. I will guarantee you they knew nothing about child labor laws.
My parents didn't either.
I guarantee you they didn't know anything about that. But you know what? Everything that I've become started with that basic fundamental. Coming from a little old town in Wheatland, Missouri, of 356 people, my mom and dad, who they were. And my mom had an 8th grade education, so, and back then that's kind of the way it was for a lot of people. But the one thing I always remember about my mom, kind of when I was in the military, she'd write letters every once in a while. My mom had the beautifulest handwriting you ever seen.
You still have those letters?
No, I don't have them anymore. I wish I would have kept them.
I know, the things you think of.
Young and dumb, I guess, at the time. But anyhow, just, you grew up in an environment where, what it was like to respect people, how you helped one another out. If somebody was in a little bit of a need or they needed something, everybody just kind of chipped in and helped each other. So I want to say that was the fundamentals of how I grew up, and, milk cows, hogs, chickens, and a big garden. And when I say big garden, in today's world we think, oh, well, you must be like gardening. It's the way we survived. I mean,
put food on the table.
That's how you put food on the table in the wintertime and everything. So I always enjoy talking about where I came from. Mm-hmm. It's a very humble beginning. I'm kind of a dying breed that's probably going to come from that kind of background. Mm-hmm. But
especially sharecropping, because I know what it is, but many listeners wouldn't even be able to define what a sharecropper meant.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things. When I wrote the book and the biography, I had to explain that. Mm-hmm. That you kind of move from farm to farm, and you're really you're the hard hands, mm-hmm. And the whole family is to a certain degree. But that's how you survived, to have a place to live, and you took percentages of whatever your work.
Survived. What was harvested.
And if you had a bad year, you had a bad year. It wasn't like you got a constant paycheck because you didn't. And but I mean, long hours, but. Looking back on it, it's the way it was, and I enjoyed it, and we still talk about it. My brothers always kid all the time about what it was like growing up on a farm.
Well, four brothers.
Four brothers.
Kent, Lee, Ike, and you.
Yep.
Two and then two, and you were that unexpected blessing.
Yeah, I was unexpected. Well, yeah, there was probably there's a little part in my career where I probably wasn't such a blessing as maybe it should have turned out to be. But my two older brothers are 17 and 15 years older than I am, and Lee has passed away since then. He passed away several years ago, and. But actually, there was two sets of families. It was like, I don't remember my older brothers being at home. Mm-hmm. And so then it was me and my brother, Ike. We always like to take claim for the Ike and Mike candy. We never get any royalties off of it, but anyhow.
You stole my joke, man. I was going to bring that up, but that's not his given name, right?
No, it's James Dwight.
So,
we always call him
Dwight?
Ike.
So you got
that's Dwight
Ike. Okay.
Yeah, is where that come from on that. So we always made fun of Mom and Dad. We'd always give them a hard time at holiday time, saying, hey, did you really just have us for 2 sets of hard hands on the farm? Because when the older ones left, we took their place.
Very smart.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 10 years older than my brother, so maybe my parents did the same thing. Spread them out so you always got someone at home.
Yeah. Might have been the plan all along. Who knows?
So you talked about the farm, and in those days, what year were you born?
1955.
55. Okay, so farming was diversified. You farmed everything to need to survive. But your father was a lifetime farmer. So what did he specialize in? What was his niche?
I think back then the milk cows were the basics for the economy. I mean, that's how you got your funding. I mean, that's where you really, when you got that milk check, everything was driven around that. Because honestly, you just go to the store once a month. It wasn't like you run down to the convenience store every day or something like that. And you traded. You went there and just how you grew up, trading eggs, cashing the milk check, buying the necessities you needed. But honestly, most of the stuff come from the farm. I mean, the vast majority of your food come from the farm all along. But that's kind of how you did that. But I would say the milk check probably was the one that kind of was the center of things. And then you sold some livestock, some cows from time to time. You sold hogs all the time. And then chickens, you had chickens. We just had it all. But, there's a reason I don't milk cows anymore, and there's a reason I don't have hogs anymore. So, if I offend anybody, too bad. I don't know. Get over it.
You can't. They're the most hardworking people.
Oh, they hard.
I have beef cows. That's what I stick with. I don't got to milk them in the morning and in the evening. Your first I'm not going to say job on the farm because none of us are getting paid. But your first responsibility as a young kid on the farm. When was the first thing that Dad's like, you can do this, but I don't trust you here yet?
Yeah, there's several moments there where your dad turns over the respect to you that you did. But I remember driving a truck at 10 years old maybe. I mean, I remember.
Was that when they still had a farm license?
I don't know.
You don't know?
They don't have any license back then that I knew of, other than you just got in a truck.
And you just go.
I don't think we paid much attention to stuff like that back then. But I remember my dad had an old truck. It was a 5-speed, and I remember he tied a 2x4 on the clutch and a throttle so I could drive it from the fields to the barn, and he'd put it in granny low, and it would just creep all the way back from the field to where we unloaded it. And that was some of the first things I did. And then I remember one time everybody wanted to buck bales, until you knew you should have never learned how to buck bales.
Exactly.
Yeah, but when you're a little kid, you're driving or you're running around there and I said, man, I want to buck bales like the big boys. I did, and I remember my neighbor, he would come up and he always helped us hay, and we'd always help him. So one time we're going down there, and I'm a kid, and he's a grown man, and he's going down there, and we'd get down the end of the row in a hayfield, and he'd say, switch sides, switch sides. I said, what the difference does it make? I mean, you're bucking square bales all day long, so who cares? But we'd get down the other end of the field. He'd say, switch sides, switch sides. And then we'd go and eat lunch. I've got hay all over me, where I'm sweating and everything, and he's kind of clean. And I kept thinking, it took me a year or two, so I was a little slow learner, and every time he was putting me downwind. And when he put me downwind, I'm eating the hay, and he's over there just clean as he could be on it and everything. So you learn from your neighbors and farming.
The hard way sometimes.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
So, stories about you and your brother, Mike, or your Mike, you and Ike. There's just so many I'm sure that you have. What's one of the greatest memories being a scandalous, little farm boy running around?
I think just every time we were together. I mean, if we were playing sports out there, I remember one time we put up a basketball goal on an old cedar tree and cutting the limbs down and just doing crazy stuff like that. And then he was the one that had to take me around when he was turned 16 and I was 14. I made him take me everywhere, and I'd con him in somehow or bribe him into letting me go with him, and he'd dump me off uptown, and I'd hang out with the big boys.
He didn't want to hang out with you too long.
Oh, no. He didn't. But, we were always pretty close. I mean, everything we did, we kind of shared and did as brothers.
How would he describe you as a teenage young boy?
Well, now, he may have a little different description of me than what I was. So, well, let me set the stage for everybody that's listening.
Sure.
So my dad was a deacon. Mm-hmm. My oldest brother's a preacher. The one that passed away, Lee, he was a deacon. Mm-hmm. And then my other brother, Ike, is just a super nice, great guy. I mean, he just really is. Everybody always likes him. I didn't go down the same path as the rest of the family members.
Took them a little longer to catch up.
I went a different route. I think I fell out of the tree on my head, and I think I suffered a concussion for a while. But anyhow, at about 15 years old, a little bit before 15 years old, I just started running with the wrong crowd, doing a lot of things, hurt my parents a little bit, my family, and actually got in a little trouble. I was on probation for a little while, so I knew a little bit about the judicial system, and that's where I tell everybody, actually, that's where my law enforcement career started.
Well, you stole one of my questions, because I was going to ask, what inspired you to go into law enforcement? But you talk about how I think that's the rite of passage for many, many teenagers. Yeah. Just they want to go out and get messy and make their own decisions, and then you come back and you're like, man, mom and dad were right.
Yeah. Well, when you look back on it, sometimes you always want to blame somebody for something, but most of the time it comes right back to you. Mm-hmm. And the mistakes we make in our life are normally self-inflicted, and mine was, and I did that. So you want to know how I transferred from that to being in law enforcement. So I can tell you how that happened. At 19 years old, I joined the Army because I didn't think things were going so well, and it just seemed like I wasn't heading in quite the right direction. Mm-hmm. So the recruiter was flipping through the pages, and I remember sitting down with the recruiter, and he says, what is it you think you know or your experiences would be? And I said, well, I come from a farm. I can shoot pretty good. So if you need an infantryman, I could qualify there. If you need a mechanic, I could turn wrenches, know how to do stuff like that. And he said, well, let me see what openings I got. And I'll never forget. He's flipping through the book. And he says, we got some openings in this. We got some openings in that. He said, we got some openings in the military police. I said, hey, wait a minute. I know a little bit about that, from the other side. And I said, if you did anything when you was a kid, when you're a young man, does it make any difference? He says, we don't care what you did. We don't give a dang what you did when you was a kid. We're going to make a man out of you. I said, just sign me up for that one. I kind of know that. So I always say that's why I always thought my law enforcement career, I understood about a lot of people more than most could because I'd made the same mistakes and done some things wrong. Didn't do everything, but I always thought that was one of the advantages I had.
Well, I think there's this element of relatability that you can present to all sides.
Yeah, and I think you understand that. People just go through tough times in their lives for whatever reason it might be. But
we're human.
But it doesn't mean you can't fix it. So I think that experience I had early on always made me a good law enforcement officer.
Before we go more into your military career, tell me about your first Ford tractor.
Oh, my first Ford tractor. You've got some inside information here, I think.
I bought a book.
Well, first of all, my dad, we never had new equipment. Everything we worked on. If you didn't know how to use crescent wrenches and baling wire and a lot of grease, you ain't going to make it on our place. But my dad, anyhow, we had one tractor, and it was the livelihood of everything on the farm. It was. And I'd been gone for a little while, and I'd joyride in a tractor where most people's got something else to joyride, so I wanted to drive the tractor and went down to the back field, probably come out a little faster out of the gate than I should have, lost a little control of the tractor, flipped it over down a ravine, and the tractor fell on top of me, and everything went kind of bad from there.
So was the I don't know tractors. This the Ford 681, but is that like a narrow, like the wheels are tight?
No,
so you had a wide base.
Yeah, I had a wide front end. No, there was no excuses that I could come up with. And when I did, I do remember the tractor falling on top of me, and I do remember it on my back. And I was kind of in a little creek where it was, and I remember I was in a creek, and I remember my feet got wet. I do remember that, and the tractor started sparking, and then I remember seeing the key, but I didn't think enough to go shut it off, which wouldn't have made any difference, I don't guess. But anyhow, and then the tractor catches fire, so, you're 10, 11, 12 years old, you start thinking, hey, maybe I better get out of here. So I did, and it's about mile and a half from my house, and I started walking down the road, and I was crying and carrying on.
Of course.
And then I started realizing my foot started really hurting really bad, and I kept thinking, I didn't know what it was. I thought, the water? What's going on? But it wasn't water. It was battery acid that had got on my socks and soaked them up. So, I had to kind of go through that little ordeal. But I didn't know that for a while. So,
oh, man. Well, driving there's a lot of driving stories, always had a speedy lead foot, and it leads to, owning service stations and things like that. So, that first job, did you ever think that, that first little gas station that you'd make a career out of it?
No, I didn't. I did not. I remember Ronnie Roby used to have the gas station there, and my cousin had another one that I worked at. But I had just turned 15. I might have still been 14 and when I started working there. And I remember I would stand on a pop case. I'd have to stand on it to wash the windows because I couldn't reach the center of it. So I'd have to stand on there to do that. And then, you just start learning how to fix tires and truck tires. I mean, and I thought it was better than hauling hay all day.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to ask.
And, I did that of a night, because you just still didn't make much money.
Yeah, so Dad didn't really let you off the farm, but when you're free time, you still needed to make some extra cash.
Dad never let you off the farm. So you're milking early or milking late, one of the two, and you're working in between. But, it's just a lifestyle, but I kind of liked it, doing it and everything. And then you got a free food because they had a little cafe there. So they'd fix me like a cheeseburger every day. And the lady that worked in there was the best cook there ever was. And then finally, I got on her best side, and then I'd get a double cheeseburger. So life was good for me.
You got to work the system, for sure.
Oh, yeah. So it was good.
So you graduated high school there at Wheatland, and immediately did you know you wanted to go into military? No,
I really didn't. I was I graduated, and when I was 19, I'd been around for a little bit, and I just decided, here's Wheatland, Missouri. What's the future here? And when I was thinking there just wasn't a lot. I mean, it wasn't like the opportunity. I had enough money to go buy a farm or start my own because my folks didn't have any types of means to even help if they wanted to. They were surviving on their own.
Well, to bring in that next generation on the farm is still hard today.
Yeah, it's one of the things when I was governor that I stressed so much, and you've heard me talk about that. I mean, trying to give young people an opportunity to farm is difficult. It's very difficult, very expensive, and back then it was even worse, really, unless somebody's just going to give you something, and it just didn't work out for me. So I thought, where am I going to go? So actually, I joined the military. I'd never been out of the state of Missouri, and we had never been on a family vacation at that point because my dad just didn't. He just milked, and he didn't.
Nobody did.
Yeah, I mean, when you do that, you didn't even think about it. You'd hear other kids saying, "Hey, we went on vacation." I thought, I wonder what that's like, But it just the way it was. But so that was my first trip out of the state in the United States Army, and that'll grow you up pretty quick. And I remember I took my basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, and then I got sent to Fort McClellan, Alabama, which I was taking MP training. So my whole plan to join the military is either get stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, or Texas, Fort Hood, Texas. And the reason I wanted to go to Fort Hood, Texas, because of Gillies. I'll just admit that right up front. I wanted to go to Gillies. So I thought, well, if I got stationed down there, I'd go to Gillies. So, and then I got sent to 21st Replacement Division, Frankfurt, Germany. And I thought,
right after.
Yeah, I thought, where the heck is Frankfurt, Germany? And I had to go and look at the map. I did. I mean, I went in there and said, well, wait a minute, I can't be doing this. And so I did that for about 3 years.
So 3 years in Germany, and then another deployment.
I did. I re-enlisted and went back in, and they give me a choice of saying, we got some openings in Alaska. And I thought, well, I'd like to see Alaska, but what other choice you got? And they said, Hawaii. And I said, okay, I think I'll just go to Hawaii and hang around there for a few years. So that's what I did. And no regrets on my military career. I mean, I got a lot of training there by the FBI and a lot of knowledge and to be able to do that. And it was really the kind of the path to get me to be sheriff back home at Polk County when the day come. So
you came home.
Yes.
And that's you're like, oh, yeah, maybe law enforcement was natural, Yeah. So what made you... what led you, I mean, working as a deputy sheriff in Hickory County, and then later on, what were those first thoughts and roles as the other side? Because, I mean, I think military police is quite different than your local law enforcement.
Well, I think you go back and you work in the field you'd been trained at, so you did that. And there was a side of you wanted to go back home. You wanted to go back home. I've been gone for a long time, so I wanted to go back home. But really what changed is Charlie Simmons, the sheriff of Polk County at the time, and I was trained in investigations and a lot of training, and most people back there didn't have that kind of training. So he called me, Sheriff Simmons did, and he says, hey, I'd like for you to come work for me. I'd like you to be an investigator. And he said he'd been doing it all himself, and so I took him up on that. And then that's how the relationship really started in Bolivar, in Polk County. That's what brought me there to that. And so, and I thought the world of him. He was a great guy. And then one day he come down, and at the time I was doing the gas stations then. I was a deputy, and then I had the farm, and I was trying to do all that stuff.
So the service stations, did your first one that you purchased, take me through the day in the life of that? Because you're kind of a one-man band, I'd say.
It seemed like for a long time that's the way it was. It's what I knew. I knew I was good at it. I mean, I knew I could turn wrenches, and I knew what it was like to take care of customers and treat people pretty good. So it's kind of exciting when you're young and you think, here I am going to build a business, So that's kind of the way I looked at it. But at the time I was also working night shift. So I was working the gas stations of a daytime and then working of a nights there. And still I had a place rented at the time. I didn't own a place then, but I had a farm rented. So I was trying to do all these things.
That's a lot of hats.
Yeah. But it was fun. I mean, what the heck? So that's kind of how it all started, was like that. And
so one thing led to another. You grew your business.
Yeah.
You grew your role in law enforcement. But in there somewhere, you met a young lady who we now know as the First Lady.
Yeah.
How does she fall into the picture?
Yeah. Well, because I was a lucky. It is what that was all about. Trust me, at the time I had the gas stations, and I always joke around this, if you want to catch a real pretty gal, I can tell you how to do it. Nobody's took my advice yet.
No, well, let's hear it.
Okay, all right. So you got to have a wrecker. You need to have an old wrecker. You can't have a new wrecker. And you got to have your name on your shirt and a grease rag in your back pocket. That's the first thing that will bring them to you, on that. So, no, not really. The truth is, I was, at the time, I was kind of running around a little bit, doing a lot of things, and wasn't too settled down. And I kept doing deposits at the bank. And Teresa at the time was a drive-in teller. And, I mean, I thought she was pretty as a picture, and she still is. So, but I thought she was out of my league before I ever started. So I went back to the gas station one day, and the lady working for me up front running the register stuff, she says, you need to settle your butt down and find you a good woman. I said, well, I'll tell you what, that gal up there
she was tired of taking care of you.
Yeah, she was giving me advice all the time. So I said, well, if that gal up there at the bank, she's pretty as she can be. I'd kind of like to go out with her or something like that, just jokingly. And so that was the girl that worked for me was Teresa's cousin.
But you didn't know that?
I didn't know that. I had no idea. So she calls Teresa and says, hey, if my boss would ask you out, would you go out with him? And of course, Teresa, I don't know. He hadn't asked me. So
I haven't looked at him yet.
So I had to go through that. So that's how it all first started, that I asked her out on the first day.
How many times did you make deposits before you...
I made enough deposits. She probably shouldn't have went out on a date with me. I tell you, she didn't marry me for my money. I could tell you that.
So she said yes.
She said yes.
She said yes, and the rest is history.
The rest is history, and here we are.
What led you two together? Like, you think of similar lives. Her background, she was a farm girl. She similar raising.
Yeah. Well, first of all, she's pretty as she could be, and like I said, and then I did know her background, and I knew who she was as a person, and I just thought she was an ideal person if I was lucky enough to be the one that she would pick to be able to spend a life with. And then I think just everything we've been through since then, I joke around all the time. Teresa worked in the banking industry for 40 years. That's all she did, and I've been farmer, stations, military, state reps. I'm the only one in the family that's never been able to hold a job for any length of time.
She was the stable one.
She was the stable one of the family, I guess. But, and then the two kids, I mean, they were just all kind of a package deal at the time. And I fell in love with the kids and here we are now. 6 grandkids later, 3 great-grandkids, a 4th one on its way, hopefully in another week or 2. So I've just been really blessed when it comes on the family side and to my family. And they've been so good to me during everything we've been through.
Well, she helped you continue to grow the business, the service station. Her business sense probably, pulled you out of the trouble here and there.
Yeah. Well, you go back to schools in Wheatland. I wasn't the best of students either. So, that's a whole different story, and that'll take another whole segment if we had to talk about that. But I think for Teresa, she would come down after work and she would do all the books. Mm-hmm. And keep everything running on that end of it. So it was just me and her for a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't like we had a wrecker. I'd run it of a night time. She'd close out the books, and it was 6 days a week, about 14 hours a day, and we didn't have anything back then. I mean, we had a lot of debt. We was trying to figure out how to pay the bills. And
you were still working as an investigator, the sheriff's
department?
For a little
while. Okay. Yeah, for a little while I was that, and then I had to give that up, and kind of because the gas stations were going good at the time and all that. So that was good, and it was just a lot of hours and everything. But we started getting ahead. We started paying the bills, and gosh, there's so many people that helped us along the way that was loyal to us and good customers, and just so many stories I could tell about all those people. But
right, and I think it's just the community. I think of I didn't grow up. I'm a Lawrence County kid and now Laclede County kid, but I just know that Hickory and Polk counties are just like all these other Southwest Missouri and Missouri counties, of course. Yeah. But rural life, neighbors, helping those neighbors and community supporting each other.
You're right, and it's just respect for one another and just hard work. Everybody knows you kind of come through, you had to work hard to get anything, and you had to treat people right to be successful. And those 2 lessons right there has never changed in my life, even from Hickory County to the mansion in Jeff City. All them fundamental things have stayed with me the whole time, and I utilize them to this day. And it's all about a foundation. And as long as you got a foundation, you can build anything.
So what led you to run for sheriff? That was the next stage of life, right?
Well, again, another story. The sheriff. That's
what we're here for, stories.
The sheriff, actually, that I really thought a lot of, Sheriff Simmons, he come down and he said he wasn't going to run, and he said he wanted me to take his place. So at first I thought, how would I possibly do that? But I was very intrigued because I wanted to take a small county sheriff's department and make them into a top-notch agency. And I felt like I could do that. I really did. I felt like I
those leadership skills that you've later brought to the state were already there.
They were there. But at the time, the sheriff paid like $22,000, and I was making a lot more money than that at the gas station and everything. So I remember having to go home, and I thought, okay, this is more intriguing. I'm kind of thinking about it, but I better bring it home to Teresa and said, hey, Charlie come down and had an interesting conversation, asked me to run for sheriff. What do you think? She said, well, that's what you want to do. I understand your law enforcement career and all this stuff and everything. But finally, the question got, well, what's that pay? And that kind of turned the tide the wrong way there for a little bit. But anyhow, the rest is history. I ran and I won and became a sheriff of Polk County, and it's one of the proudest elections I've ever had.
That's humbling.
And I will say that because, and being the governor, everybody thinks that's pretty special, and it is. But that first election was the most important one back home because that's where our kids grew up, was where our church was, where the schools were. People knew the best, and they trusted you to do that job. And that has always been a very special election to me.
As sheriff, talk of one of the most rewarding moments, one of the most challenging moments. Can you remember any of those stories where, without naming names, but you have a lot?
I think that the challenging things that occurred was a lot of the major cases, homicides and things like that, which I did a lot of that. But I think as a small rural area, you work homicides, you work pretty brutal cases sometimes, suicides, different types of things. And the people. You've got a connection with them. It's not like it's a stranger that you're talking about. It's normally somebody that there's a connection to of who you are. Excuse me. But I think those are the tougher times that you have to deal with that. But I think the fun part about it was building the agency, bringing great qualified people in to do about anything would come our way. And I think just the fun part of helping people from time to time. I think law enforcement sometimes gets mixed up on, we're supposed to be somebody a little tougher.
We're non-human.
We have the image. And there was always an image I tried to break down. I wanted to make sure the officers knew that it was good to go to a school or to a ball game or to a farm and talk to kids, speak to them. Because they're intimidated by you when you come in there because you're wearing a badge and a gun and they don't know. But I think it was always important to make those relationships. So it was fun building it from the ground up, but another zillion stories about sheriff stories. Some I can tell, some I can't.
So what did your kids think about their dad being the sheriff?
Oh, they hated it. They hated it when I first
would have hated it.
They were like saying, oh, my gosh, our lives are over. They're like teenagers at this time. I said, nobody's going to want to talk to us. Nobody's going to want to come. And all
you got the unfun house.
Yeah. But the truth was they got that turned around pretty quick. So then everybody wanted to know the sheriff, so they wanted to come to our house to make sure they had a good standing with law enforcement. And my kids would say, hey, such and such got a ticket, and he really didn't do it the way. And I said, okay, kids, I've heard this 1,000 times. So they kind of used it to their advantage for a while. So
I don't blame them.
But before it was over, they were fine, and they was proud of it. But yeah, at first they thought they were all going to be, nobody would talk to them again.
So how many years did you serve Polk County as sheriff?
12 years.
12 years.
12 years.
And then you're like, what now? You've been there, done that, and did you go looking for something else, or were you ready to slow down?
It's the crazy thing about my career. When I left the sheriff's office, I told my family that I was going to do something different because I really seen all I wanted to see. It wasn't the challenge of the work. It's just I'd seen enough, and I just was getting to the point where I thought, I don't want to go see any more bad situations. I just didn't. And so I thought I'd do something different. But I had no idea about Jeff City wouldn't even enter my mind. And my kids and Teresa was saying, well, what are you going to do? Because they kept thinking, well, you got to get a job. You're not old
she's
enough to
holding
quit.
down the fort.
Yeah, she's the one that's got a steady job. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know. I thought about starting a lawn mowing business or doing something, that I could do, or going and buying another gas station. I didn't care at the time. But I'd sold my gas station at that point. But I was actually playing golf with some guys one day, and Ronnie Miller, who was a state rep over in Cedar County, was out there, and something was mentioned about state rep. And he said, yeah, you ought to do that. Term limits is here. You ought to run for that. So that's how it come about. And for no background, I wasn't looking for anything like that. And then I was a state rep for 6 years, so I never completed my first term as a state rep. So theoretically, I could go back and run for state rep.
Well, there you go. I'll start the campaign. You've already got the signs, right?
Yeah. So that's a little story, too, because I didn't finish my term as a state rep. I only did 6 years. So then Delbert Scott was in the Senate at the time. He retired.
That opened up.
He was term limited out, so that's position open. So I did the Senate. So I never completed the term as a senator. I only did 6 years in the Senate. I didn't do the full 8 years. And then I run for a lieutenant governor. And I never completed the full term of a lieutenant governor. And then I became governor, and I never completed the term of governor. So I'm telling you, I've never been able to hold a job.
You can't. They just keep moving you around, shuffle you around. So, you had to campaign for Polk County Sheriff.
Yeah.
Did that kind of set the stage? To me, okay, if running for office, the most intimidating thing is not the service, it's the campaign. To put yourself out there, to make yourself vulnerable, to air dirty laundry, so to speak. You hear that said. But so going back to, I guess you call it your second campaign, after sheriff as state rep, how to me that's intimidating. It's crazy. It's scary.
Yeah. Well, I think the hardest thing about campaigns has always been for me, and I think it's your background, is you have to go out there and sell yourself. It's always easy to sell somebody else, or if I want to sell cattle farmers or the Cattlemen's Association, I can do that all day long, farming. But when you have to go out there and you got to tell people, hey, I'm the best choice, I'm a good guy, and this is why you should vote for me. You have to do that, but it's not how you kind of grew up to do that. To kind of like brag on yourself, say, hey, I'm the best there is or on that. So I think that's the most difficult part of it. And then just the time it takes. And I've always said on any campaign I've ever run for, whether it was state rep, I never thought anybody would outwork me. I just always had that advantage. I always thought that, and I've most of the time I've been behind, or I wasn't the chosen one, I want to say, to win some elections. And each time, I just said, look, man, I'm not leaving anything on the table. I was never going to be a candidate that would come back and say, I wish I would have done this. I never felt like I was ever in that position. I mean, I'm going to put it all on the table. If it works out, it works out.
Well, I think from the first time I met you, and I'll come to that in a minute, but authenticity is something that I've just seen stream through you in every handshake and every podium you spoke behind, every person I've seen you meet, just real. And I think that's what I've seen that. I think it started way before you were governor, I guess is my point.
Yeah. People say that from time to time. You say, is he the real deal, or he seems so genuine, or something like that. Those are probably some of the best compliments I've ever had in my career, and especially as governor, because people would ask the security team, does he really act like this normally?
Because they know everything.
Oh, yeah, they know. Or, they'd ask silly questions like, what's he like to eat, or something like that. But, I always thought, and I would give the advice to anybody, whether it's politics or whether it's daily life, you just got to be who you are. Because if you start trying to be somebody too polished or somebody you're not, I think people read through that pretty quick. And I think that's what some of the things wrong with the political arena nowadays. People want somebody that's genuine, that believes that, hey, he can understand who I am or what I've been through or what I've done, And I always hope I never lost that ability to connect with people like that. So.
Well, I don't believe you have.
Good.
So that first campaign, that first race, you went home from that golf course, and you had to break it to Teresa that you might run for office. She knew you needed a job.
Yeah.
But was she saying this should be the job?
Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe I should be interviewing her. I'd love to get that.
I'm trying to hedge on how I answer. I think the thing about it is I was okay with it because if once I make the decision to do it, then I'm all in. Now that's not Teresa's cup of tea to be in the political arena. She just never was in that environment. And being sheriff, you got to be a little bold sometimes, and you get a lot of attention and all. But that's not her. She's always been kind of behind the scenes a little bit. I said, and all of a sudden now she's got to be center stage, and you're part of the team to try to win an election.
And I think that's part of it it's a team. Whoever your partner is, you've got to be all in. Your kids, parents, everybody. It doesn't matter if it's the local sheriff all the way up to governor. It's a family affair.
Well, and back then, that's what you had to make your own signs. It wasn't like you could go out and buy the fancy little plastic signs we all did nowadays.
Yeah.
But back then, you're out there brush painting a sign, and the kids are out there.
It's called child labor. It's great.
Yeah, they're like going crazy because you're making them paint signs all the time and giving them cards to pass out and all this kind of stuff. So it's another one of those challenging things your family goes through. But again, I've just been so fortunate to have such a family that's so supportive of everything I've done.
What was the climate of Missouri politics that first year in office at the Capitol? Think back.
When I first went up there, it just switched over. The Republicans had took the majority in the House and the Senate at the time. So
who was governor at that time?
Governor Blunt.
Blunt.
Had just been elected.
Okay, that's
had
what
just been elected. So we had turned over. So there was a lot of conservative things that were going on that was really a push because they hadn't had the governor and both general assemblies hadn't been done for like 40 years. So there was a lot of people all excited about that and was talking about that. But see, I didn't know any of that stuff really. So I'm kind of learning it up there as I go. And, you're trying to figure out where's my office and where do I sit and all this kind of stuff when you first go up there. And you don't know nothing. I'll tell you, anybody goes up there and thinks they do, they're joking, because you don't.
Yeah, so that first team that your first employees there, they had more experience than you did. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So they're the ones keeping you straight and pointing you. Tell me about those first committees you were on.
Oh, well, a couple of committees that were on. One was on, at the time, was seniors, and agriculture was one, and some of the committees I was on. And, what I did being on the health and senior citizens is I learned a lot. I knew about all there was in law enforcement to know. I felt like I knew ag. But, it was kind of interesting to start learning about new things you didn't know about, about how things worked outside of your little norm. And so then I started going, I sat on a transportation committee at the time, I remember, and I started trying to figure out, okay, how do we spend money and why do we spend it and what are we going to do with it? And I remember going on this transportation committee and I said, by golly, if them big cities are going to get money, so is Polk County, Hickory County. I'm going to get just as much as they got, as a new guy up there. Then somebody says, well, you know how much taxes come out of Hickory County compared to St. Louis, and how many people are there? And you get thinking, this is why we spend more money up there on highways. So it was a quick lesson I learned.
Quick lesson.
Yeah.
You think about like that lesson or your desire to keep learning. I go back to Wheatland High School, and you're like, school.
Yeah.
Did you ever dream that you'd have to be the lifelong learner of these such broad spectrum of topics?
Absolutely not. But yeah, there's totally different learning than what it was in school. And at the time, I mean, look, I didn't do good in school because I didn't want to do good. If you go back to my school days, it was mainly, okay, what does it take to play sports? And if it was a C-, that was my goal. I didn't care about a C. C- was it. And, doing other things besides doing what I should be doing at the time. But when I went to Jeff City, again, I starting to like to learn again. I was trying to figure out, why do these things happen? If I'm going to represent people, I got to know these things, And the transportation, needless to say, that little committee I was on when I first went in there turned out to be such an important part of my career when I become governor, to be able to put those pieces back together. But I soon, I was older than most. I mean, I had a little age on me when I went up there, and I had a little common sense. I didn't get all excited and wrapped around the political issues. I was always trying to figure out, how does the system work, and how does it and how do you make it a little better for people back home? And one thing you got to learn is you got to learn the budget. Most people don't want to do the budget because it's hard. So that's where I started learning. I said, okay, how's the money go in? How's it go out? And who just gets to decide where this is all the way it was? So I was always intrigued by learning that. So, and that paid off in the long run for me too. And so I just had some good experience. And I kept learning, and I enjoyed it. I did.
Well, and I think that you can tell that you enjoyed it. I think that so often you think of going to D.C. or any capital, going for us, Jefferson City, and getting sucked into the I don't want to say thrill, but the power, the decision making, all that, and you forget your roots, the humble beginnings, or who you're actually representing. How did you? And I'm kind of fast tracking, so this is going to be from that first day to your last day in office as governor. How did you stay rooted and not let it consume you?
Yeah, you just got to remember where you came from. Go back to those basic fundamentals I told you, treating people right, being respectful, and then remember why you went up there. I think what happens, a lot of people go up there and, like you said, you wear a fancy suit and people start whining, dining you and slapping you on the back and telling you how wonderful you are. But there's always a motive to those people, a lot of them up there doing that. And I think you got to be real careful. And if you're a young guy, you can get sucked into that pretty quick, of that kind of lifestyle. And you got to remember where those roots came from. And I'm up here supposed to be representing people back home. Not all the fast movement that's up there sometimes. And I get it's up there, and I understand how that process works. But you always got to be grounded on who you are, because you're nobody special. And the one thing you should be humbled, because the first time you get to walk in that state capitol and you're a state rep, a state senator, a statewide office holder, just to set one of those seats, you ought to understand how special that is. Because very few people get to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. In your book, you talk about that first year or so in office that you not just wanting to take a seat on the bus, but wanting to, and that bus of General Assembly, but wanting to learn how to be a leader and what it might take to get closer to that steering wheel. Right. What was learning that key component, or what else added to it?
Oh, I think so. I'm driven that way. I mean, I don't want to be just, like I said, one person out of 163. I want to figure out what makes the thing work and how do you get to the position where you make decisions. So where is that table at, or where is that chair at? And how do you surround yourself with people that kind of think like you think and says, hey, we really do want to make some changes, and here's how you do it. So term limits had just kicked in, so then you started thinking, okay, with term limits kicking in, all these chairmanships are going to change pretty rapidly. So, I got myself and I want to say some other old farm boys and some people I knew from the city, and started making friends with a lot of people, and says, why don't we start thinking about what these positions we might want? If we got 8 years to do it, you can't wait 4 years to make a decision. So let's make it now. And I got a group of guys together and said, we really got in a room, about 12 of us, says, okay, who wants to be speaker? Who wants to be the floor leader? Who wants blah, blah, do this? And we went around the room actually and started making that plan put together, and actually executed that plan before it's over.
I think that you can tell me to stop if I'm being rude, but I think of 12 male egos in one room, and you're all leaders. Like, how do you make decisions? How do you step back and say, no, you do that, I don't need it? I don't know. That had to have been a very hard decision and conversations, but you all knew each other's strengths and weaknesses?
You kind of got to be friends, and you kind of knew who people were, and we're saying, hey, look, here's a common objective we have. So why not a freshman being in a position, a freshman legislator being in a position of leadership? Why do you got to wait to do that? There's enough of us come in together. Why don't we just put our forces together and see what that's going to be? And at the time, I didn't want to be Speaker of the House. I really didn't. I didn't want to be in this position. But I was kind of in a role where I wanted to help some of these people. I wanted to see somebody pretty talented that I thought I could help get along to be bigger officers or bigger players up there. And, and I just wanted to sit at a leadership table. I didn't care what the position was. I just wanted to sit there and bring a little common sense to what we're supposed to be doing up there. And that's kind of how it all started. It all worked out.
It did. And I think we talk a lot about term limits, and it's really all I've ever known. But let's go back a little bit. What was the political climate in Missouri before term limits?
Well, there was a lot of chaos during that time because, the Democrats had been in control for a long time, and that was coming to an end. So everybody was trying to adapt to that. You've been in control of something for 40 years, and all of a sudden, and you had a former speaker that was in trouble, and there was just a lot of things happening that was going. And the wave was just changing in the country. I think I always say this because politically, the Democrats that I grew up with were good, hardworking people. They weren't the Democrat side that I would say is today. That's way, way over there on a different spectrum. I think there was a lot of people back home that thought like we think today, that I think the party's changed sometime on you. And look, I'm a firm believer, and I've seen the best and the worst of both sides. I really have. But you've got the people that are extreme on one side, the left and the right.
Exactly.
But at some point, if you're going to be in that kind of positions, you got to govern. There's certain basic things that you got to provide for people, and that was my whole goal the whole time. It was never to try to divide it, anything like that. I just wanted to say, how do we make the state of Missouri better for people back home? How do I make things better for my mom and dad for everything they went through, although I didn't get a chance to do that. But, they didn't have nothing, and I'll be honest with you, they never asked the government for anything. Never. So all they wanted to do was be left alone and live their life. And so my whole goal was to say, how do we slow this train from going so fast, no matter who you are? And you have to have coalitions. You have to work on both sides if you're going to be successful. I believe that. So,
you talk about your parents. How old were you when they passed? Did they see you in the sheriff?
They knew I was sheriff.
Okay.
Yeah. They knew I was sheriff, and they got to see that part of it. But they never got to see me as governor or senator or anything like that. My mom would have never made it anyhow. As the people in social media world today, my mom would have had to come apart. She'd have been fighting everybody. I mean, she was the feisty one of the bunch. And my dad, he was just always low keyed and straight to doing business, but he would never get caught. But my mom she would have never made it. I'm just telling you.
Who do you lean more towards personality wise?
Oh, I probably got a little mixture, a little bit of my mom and a little fiery side to me, but I've got, I think sometimes my dad's wisdom side of it to slow down, think things out, and he was always great about doing that. He just never got upset about very much. He just kind of rationalized everything out. But my mom, she's pretty fiery now. When I was playing ball, she threw a ball to a referee one time. That's how fiery she is.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. give him a little lecture, and I'm thinking, I don't know who the lady is. I just
But
don't
she'd
know.
raised 4 boys, and she had been around the block a few times.
Oh, she is. Oh, yeah. Well, she was a caregiver for us, the whole bunch. It was.
Well, you brought up basketball again, and as an athlete, and I think that when you think of the younger generation, and I'm going crazy off script, but it just dawned on me. I think of you talk about you went to school to play sports.
Yeah.
You kept that C average so that you could get on the court, on the field. I think that that's there's nothing new to. I mean, that's still going on today. So I think of advice for those young kids, boys and girls, whether it's FFA or extracurriculars like sports and things like that. Thinking about what advice you'd give them about the whole learning component and how, what you are learning does add to what your future can hold.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to realize I didn't do what I should have done. I mean, I would be the first to tell you, and I paid a significant price for that in my career. I mean, I can sit down with some people, and some people can read certain documents and understand them, where I literally may have to read them twice or 3 times to get it to sink in. So I would not recommend the route that I did. I understand.
Of course. But I think of what you've come from and what you've gone and what the struggles, and you've still been successful. And I think that's empowering to not just a straight A student and a star athlete, but that C- student and the kid who got in trouble.
Yeah, you don't have to be anybody special. And I think that's the whole thing when they wrote the biography that the main thing I wanted people to understand, and that we're listening to people now. Look, just be who you are, and if you're just going to have, life is going to create issues, but you got to be able to deal with it, and you got to be able to learn. And if you didn't learn it then, you got to learn it as you continue to go through life. And I still do to this day. I mean, it's not like at 70 I thought, okay, I'm smart enough for anything that comes along. I'm still learning stuff,
Learning from those great grandkids now.
Yeah. So I always said, don't ever be ashamed for where you're from. And don't ever think you can't overcome anything. And the one thing I try to tell people all the time is don't be blaming other people for things that are wrong in your life or things you do. Okay, I get all that. But at the end of the day, most of the time, you have control of everything that happens in your life. And it's what you make of it, And that's kind of the way probably the one thing I would tell young people, just suck it up. Sometimes you got to go out there and prove who you are.
Suck it up. We all need a little advice in that. Well, Governor Parson, you will always be my favorite governor. Don't tell Kehoe. And then all the future ones. But we've dove deep beyond the gate, and we have so much more to talk about. So I hope you join us for part 2.
It'd be great. I enjoy it.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of Beyond the Gate. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. New episodes drop every other Wednesday. For more content, follow Around the Ozarks and Beyond the Gate on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to the daily newsletter at aroundtheozarks.com. Join us next time for more stories of grit, growth, and the spirit of rural life.